So as you go on this journey and you start into this realm of true self-development, you start to go, okay, well, why am I being held back by what I'm being held back by? And as you start to see different possibilities arise, you start to be more confident and competent in who you are. So how did the ego get formed in the first place? So the ego gets formed, this duality that I'm talking about, this gets formed in the first place because if you think about it, when we're born, we go through life, we don't have language yet, we have some form of understanding, some form of intelligence, because you see it on babies' faces. As we begin to learn, we begin to grow, we develop language. And as we develop language, we start to try to make sense of things. Now you might have heard these 3 questions asked. When something happens, an event happens, you're going to ask 3 questions. Now, as a child, you don't really ask these 3 questions, but as an adult looking back, we can see that they were there. You're going to ask the questions, what does this mean? What does it mean about me? What does it mean about them? What does it mean about the world? We are meaning machines. We give meaning to everything. So every event that happens, we give meaning. The only difference between a person and a stone, if you drop them off the top of a building, is that the stone will fall, whereas the person will fall, but they will give it meaning all the way down. Why did they drop me? What's going to happen when I hit the floor? What does this mean about me? Why did I end up in this situation? How could I have changed it? We're like meaning machines. So as we're growing up, events happen and we give them meaning. And the meaning we give them is the meaning that you would give with a child's intellect, a child's understanding, because you are a child. So we grow up, we have an event, we give it a meaning. Then we ask another question. How does this feel? And it's really, how does it make us feel emotionally? How is this event affecting us emotionally? And the next question we ask is, what am I going to do about it? Now, in a child's eyes, the what am I going to do about it is the coping strategies that you form that you're now running as an adult because you've never gone back to recheck out. So let's just take a look at that, okay? The very first things that begin to happen to you are when you have what I call a moment of emotional impact. And the moments of emotional impact that happen to you when you're 3, 4, 5, 6 years old are the ones that are defining your life, the ones that are defining your destiny. So a moment of emotional impact is like this. When I was 6 or 7 years old, I lived about 10 minutes from my favourite cousins. And one day I wanted to go and play with them. And my mum didn't have time to take me. Now, I'd been there lots of times before, walked with my parents, but on this occasion, my mum said to me, you can go on your own. You know where it is. Go over and play and just let me know when you get there. Wow, I was so excited. It was like an adventure. I was like 6 years old and I was being allowed to go and do something myself. I still can remember now, thinking back as I talk to you about it, how excited I was. And so I got my little bag and with my eyes wide with excitement, I left the house looking forward to my new adventure. And I walked off in their direction. Like I said, I'd been there lots of times before, so I should have known the way, right? Well, after about 30 minutes, and remember it's about 10 minutes away, I knew that. After about 30 minutes, I still hadn't found a house. I knew I was in the right direction because I recognised parts of it. I recognised the school and I recognised the lane and I recognised some of the other shops, but I just couldn't find the house. No matter which way I turned, I didn't come to their house. As I walked on and I kept trying to find their place, about 45 minutes elapsed, I guess. I've been out probably for about, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour now. And I realised that today wasn't the day I was going to find it. And I turned around to start the long walk home. And even as I recall that to you now, the emotion is present in me as I recall the feeling that I had as I began to walk home. As I arrived at my house, I knocked on my door. It was a little flat we lived in. I knocked on the door and my mum answered the door. And she looked down at me with love in her eyes like she always did, with that kind, caring compassion that my mum always had for me. And as she looked down at me, I remember looking up at her with tears in my eyes. And I said to her, Mum, I'm a failure. I can't do it. I'm not good enough. Now, that's a moment of emotional impact. Now, I wasn't aware of that immediately when I started first doing personal development and first started working 30 years ago. But as I looked at my stories and the things that shaped and defined my life, I became clearer about the events. And you can find yours. If you look at your events and you go, okay, what's happened to me that I felt emotional about? What's happened to me that's impacted me? You'll start to pick up the things, and you're looking for events that happen between probably 2 and 6 years old. When you find the events, then you need to elaborate on them and work out where was the moment of emotional impact. And for me, you can clearly see it was when I turned around and decided I couldn't do it and started walking home. And then it was we have this thing called emotional anchoring, which is where an event gets emotionally anchored into your neural pathways. So you become almost emotionally committed to running the event over and over again. And then it was emotionally anchored in as I arrived home and spoke to my mum. Now, looking back as an adult, that didn't mean I was a failure. That didn't mean I couldn't do it. It didn't mean I wasn't good enough. Looking back from the intellect I have now, clearly I was just a little boy who couldn't find his way, who probably had too higher expectations of himself. But what that did for me at the time, with my understanding, is whenever I got asked to do something exciting, an adventure, I would say, no, I don't do that anymore. That's not for me. By the time I was 16, I was a very shy, embarrassed, uncomfortable young man with a low self-esteem. I used to hide out in a crowd hoping not to be seen. And my life had taken on a pan. Now I could go through my childhood and as I got brought up, and I could show you where my now filtered image of the perception of myself being a failure and not good enough was now attracting things that looked like I was failing. I now became a person that avoided any area that might be adventurous, that might be dangerous to me feeling like a failure, that maybe I couldn't do it. I took a path in life that was the easiest path, the path of least resistance. My granddad was a builder, my dad was a builder, I became a builder. It was a no-brainer, I couldn't have failed at it. I had too much support from around me. You see, it's all about the safety. So the moment of emotional impact had created for me somebody who didn't take chances, didn't take risks, didn't take adventure. Somebody who was introvert, not extrovert. Somebody who was shy and withdrawn, not outgoing and playful. That moment of emotional impact and moments like it that carried on from that, and maybe moments before that I've never got in touch with, shaped the person who I became. And it wasn't until I saw that and I went, you know what? Just because I couldn't find their house didn't mean I was a failure. In fact, the ego is the thing that creates that perception. Because as I now go through life, I'm not adventurous like I was the day I left the house. I'm not fun and playful, going out there and trying things. No, I'm shy and withdrawn, calculating things, making sure that it's safe, being very careful about what I get myself into. Now, it's my ego that's doing that. And the reason my ego is doing that is because it doesn't matter how many times I so-called fail from now, it's all managed. My ego is managing my level of enjoyment, excitement, and involvement. And it's that management that stops me having the feeling that I failed. So now, if I fail in life, what does that mean? Not an awful lot to me, right? Because what happened is my ego already has tagged me as a failure, already tagged me as not good enough. So every time I fail or I'm not good enough at something, it's like, yeah, no, but that's what I expected. There's no moment of emotional impact. My ego has a vested interest. My arch nemesis has a vested interest in me living my life with a feeling that I'm less than I am. Now, through doing this work and through doing the work we teach, I've managed to see that was all made up to protect me emotionally. Now, getting back in touch with my true self, yes, there are feelings of sadness attached to that event. But the feelings of sadness, and this is the key, the feelings of sadness have no suffering attached to them. They are just feelings of sadness. There are plenty of other moments I could talk to you about in my life where I've been exceptional, outstanding, awesome, where I've created something I never dreamt about, where I've got in touch with other parts of me that are far greater than any part that might feel insignificant. I've got in touch with a leader, with a superhero, and that superhero is going to take me places. That superhero is going to have me succeed because I'm no longer living the ego's part of being a failure. Now, of course, I'm going to fail at stuff. I'm sure I will. Or maybe I won't, but I'm sure I'm going to. History says I will. The thing is, it doesn't matter. Like, you're always going to fail if you're playing a big enough game. So most people in life are living this safe game. They're living a game of safety where they're protecting themselves from the next moment of emotional impact.